forum. Really, what Claudia and I are going to try and do is pass on some of our experiences, having been involved in some of the industry awards over the last 10 or 12 years. As Trevor said, we want to try and make it as interactive as we can, so please do feel free to chip in with questions in the question panel, and we'll be delighted to answer anything that you throw at us. But what I'm going to do, first of all, and we're going to divvy it up a little bit between Claudia and I, but what I thought I'd start with is just going through a little bit of information about how to try and build a business case for entering the awards. I'm sure some of you that are listening today may have already embarked on that journey. You may already be thinking about which categories. You might have even started some of the submission process already. But for those of you that are still thinking about what and whether to enter, hopefully this might shed some light on how to go and speak to the powers that be in your organisation, just to make sure that you're given that support and backing. I think, from my experience, the number one thing that puts people off entering awards is not necessarily the cost that's involved. It's more the perceived idea of the amount of time and effort that's going to have to go into the judging and actually writing the physical entry form. And yeah, I'd be lying if I said that there isn't any requirement of effort, and there probably, if you're successful and your entries are shortlisted and finalists, you probably want to support them on the night. So there would be a little bit of cost involvement as well. But if you really weigh that up and consider the benefits to the company across all of the levels within the organisation, if you're doing this correctly, then those benefits far outweigh any kind of cost or time input. And I think the first mistake that most companies make when they're thinking about entering an awards program is they leave it all to one person within the business. And so that person is then responsible for writing the entry, coordinating the judging process, coordinating the teams to go and support the finalists on the evening. And that in itself, for one person, is a big job and can be quite isolating. Quite often it's a manager within the business that gets lumbered with that job, and if you're looking at it that way, then that, I completely understand, can seem like too much effort versus the reward ratio. What we're really recommending is to try and involve the wider business in the entry and the submission process, and actually as well the judging process at the same time, because there's a number of benefits to really being collaborative, not only from a time-saving perspective, but also from a motivation and team involvement basis as well. So the first thing to consider when you're building your business case is just think about the fact that this is the chance to celebrate success and let everyone in the business know that you have done something great, something fantastic, something absolutely stand out. So it might be a fantastic opportunity to really explain to the wider business, the non-contact center folks, just how much of an asset you are to the organization. It might be a way of really joining those dots up to people about how fantastic your brand guardians are, your agents are working tirelessly away, and this is a great opportunity to shout about it in a nationally recognized program. From an individual's point of view, actually putting your arm around someone and saying that you have the confidence and you have the, I suppose, the backing of them to say, we're going to put you forward for such a prestigious award, is more motivating than any pay rise, any bonus, any team night out. I mean, that really is something that people will treasure for the rest of their life. So talking about trying to get commitment from teams, putting people forward, whether it being an individual basis or whether it being a group in some of the team categories, is a really powerful and emotive and motivating factor. So really think about that when you're trying to sell this into the business, that, you know, we're all at tough times at the moment. We may not be able to offer pay rises, but something like this can be much, much more effective. This is also, when you're going through the entries process, a really good opportunity to step back, sit down and actually think about what you've done over the last 12 months. We're all incredibly busy people. As contact center professionals, you're running from meeting to meeting. It's a people role. We know how busy you are. So how often do you actually get that opportunity to sit down and actually think back to some of the things that you've done in the past? It can be a really cathartic process, and something that if you're doing it right, it can be a really useful exercise when you're strategy planning. You really help you understand success, but also the things that you might need to work on moving forward. And I think finally, from a business case point of view, if you're selling this into the organisation, don't forget that this is an awards can be nationally recognised programs, so they can be incredibly useful if you're shortlisted to be a finalist or an award winner. That's a great piece of PR and marketing, and if your marketing teams are quite canny and clever about it, they could really use that to their advantage, whether that's shouting out to customers, whether it's about shouting to suppliers. We've seen a lot of organizations use it as part of their recruitment differentiation, and you know, if nothing else, it's having a badge, having that in the armory of some of the C-level people in the organisation. That tends to look very nice on board papers at the end of the year. So I think there's a number of different reasons why organisations choose to enter an awards programme, and hopefully that's just given you a couple of ideas if you're just embarking on trying to build a business case for getting involved. So if we move forward, I'll hand over to Claudia.
Fantastic, thanks, Simon. So great. So you've made the business case, and now you're going forward and entering for the awards. So once you've decided to enter for an award, it is really important that you pick the right categories for your story, because as we'll talk about later on, it's really important that you're telling your story through this entry process. So you probably won't have time to enter lots and lots of different categories. As Simon said, it can be a bit of a time-consuming process sometimes. So it's crucial to make sure that you take the time at the beginning to carefully select the right categories for you. So to do this, just think about the achievements that you can quantify and demonstrate to the judges. It's very easy to feel like you've done a good job in a certain area or achieved something, but you really need to be able to demonstrate that achievement. So the criteria in each of the categories will help you to do this. So just go through those criteria and just see if you can make a good case for each of the criteria in that particular category. And if you can, then obviously that's a great category for you to enter into. And I think we'll talk about this a bit later on as well, but it's really, really important to bear in mind the impact that the individual or the team has had. So you really need to be able to talk about how their performance has made a difference to the business. But also, it's also vital that you can demonstrate the impact that that team or individual has had on customers. So how has the success or the achievement that you're talking about affected those end customers? So that's really, really important too. So bear that in mind when you're picking your categories to enter. So I think that's a really good point. We're going to talk about that an awful lot through this whole presentation. Is that the customer really has to be the focal point of any kind of an entry, and certainly the part of the presentation. I'm going to touch on that a little bit as we move forward, but you'll hear us talk a lot about that, because fundamentally this is a customer service awards. It's contact centers, it's customer service. If we're not referring back, then we're really missing the core point of what this awards is trying to recognise. Absolutely.
So thank you, Claudia. What I'm going to do for the next few slides is just talk a little bit about the entries process. So I'll talk about the early stages, and then Claudia's going to talk a bit more about if you are successful and you make it through to the judging process, what that might look like, and she's going to give us some hints and tips about preparing and getting ready to face the judges. So from an entries point of view, I just thought I'd start by kind of planning stage of the things you might want to think about before you embark on that journey. Now, I know that some of you may have already started, so it might be a case of having a look at this and thinking, have we done this already? Could we maybe work some of this into our process? But for those of you who are just about to start, then maybe these might be some helpful tips just to kick the ball off and get the ball rolling. So I think the first thing to say is that planning is important. Really, as Claudia mentioned, thinking about which category, looking at the criteria, really focusing on the detail, and making sure that you're fully informed about what you're going to enter. The second thing that I would say, and it touches on the point I made earlier, really try and spread the love in respects to involving the team and spreading the workload. If you're one person and you're having to tackle writing the entry on your own and coordinating everything, it's tough. One, because you can end up having tunnel vision, and it's very difficult to really think about the wider business and everything that's gone on. But also, it's a drain on time. So if you involve the team, both above you and below you and around you, not only does it help you spread that workload, but also it helps you tap into things that you may have forgotten. You'll be amazed if you actually sit there and brainstorm with the team all of the great things that you've done, all of the great examples of success you've had with customers, all the fantastic little intricacies that you may have forgotten that happened 6 months back. So it's a really useful exercise to bring the teams together. Because also, if you give them, as some individuals within your team, the opportunity to actually be involved in putting the entries process together, it's a great learning and development tool for them. It could be quite a motivating factor. It could be part of their training and their ongoing development. So again, don't forget how impactful just being involved in putting something like that together can have on some of the guys around you. We've certainly seen some good use of award champions. Some organisations have award teams that really try and build on that. And I suppose the other thing to mention is that you can register nice and early. So don't think that you have to do this all in one job lot in terms of filling out the entry form. Come back to it. Plan. Maybe start, come back to it, and it's obviously a really good idea to build lots of time in there to proofread, sanity check, and make sure that you've covered all of the detail that you need in there. So that's a little bit about the planning aspect. If I move forward, I think the next thing to talk about is how do you make your entry stand out? Now, the way this works in terms of an awards program, and this particular awards program, we will get hundreds and hundreds of entries coming in to the London and South East Contact Centre Forum Awards. So you've really got to try and think and put yourself into the judges' shoes. They have to shortlist all of these hundreds of entries down to a finalist group, which are, for want of a better word, the best and the greatest that they've come across from the entries. So if you think about it, they're going through and reading all of these entry forms, and you really have to try and do your very best to make yourself stand out. So hopefully I'm going to share some of the ways you can do that, just to try and make it a little bit easier for you to stand out from the crowd. I think the thing to first focus on, and Claudia and I have touched on this a lot, is speaking from the heart. Now, that might sound a little bit cheesy, but we've genuinely lost count of the number of companies who copy and paste corporate brochures and literature into their entry, leaving it absolutely soulless and dull. Obviously, there is a section within the entry forms that allows you to talk about the company. But when you're really talking about the meat and potatoes of why you're entering, really try and give it some heart. Bring in some examples of the things that you've done, and really don't be afraid to try and make it fun and engaging. Stories and things that might make you stand out and different are really what the judges are looking for. What they're not looking for is just another corporate brochure. And I'm going to touch on use of language a little bit later on, but we'd really recommend that you try and put things that make you stand out in the process. Second of all, I'd really think about making it people-focused. So Claudia mentioned making the customer I suppose the heart of the entry form, and that's really, really important. It's no good having lots of information about how you've saved costs in the business and profitability went through the roof if it doesn't relay back to what that means for the customer. You know, if you've ripped out a load of costs by becoming more efficient, but that's detrimental to the customer service you're offering, then the judges will obviously penalise you. So make sure you're thinking about that, but also think about the teams around you, the guys that have been involved. It may not just be the call centre. It may be other people that play a factor, other stakeholders that you may want to talk to that have done something stand out. Testimonials from customers are really a good way of getting one, the heart into the entry, but also giving it a bit of colour and emphasis into what you've done. So sometimes we see entries from people where they've put compliment letters in the supporting documents. It may just be a quote or the odd one-liner that people have left as compliments. All of that sort of thing adds real emphasis to the fact that, one, you listen to the customers, but also that you take that on board. So again, don't be afraid to put testimonials into the piece. Bullets and clear style, I'm not going to labour too much now because I'm going to come on to this in a minute, but just keep in mind that I think it's the 2,000 word limit for some of the entry submissions. Try and make it as clear and as punchy as possible. Use headings, use titles, use clear spacing. Don't feel like you have to use every last word, and if you're using every last word, you're probably doing it wrong. And really try and make it as user-friendly or as readable as possible. So just keep that in mind. And bullet points when you're talking about some of your successes are a really good way of signposting. And then finally, from making your entry stand out, I'm always a big fan of team photos. Not all the judges might not be, but I certainly like that because it gives me a window into the contact centre. And if you get to the finalist stages, the judges will really want to try and get a feel about culture and how that customer centricity breeds through the organisation. So I really like photos. I think it adds a lot to the dimension of the entry. So just for me to wrap up, I'm just going to give you a quick checklist of the things that, if I was going and entering the awards, these are the things that I would think about as I was going through the entry process. So we talked about this a lot. Have you put yourself into the customer's shoes? Make sure that you've thought about that from every angle. What makes you different? This is quite an important one. So when you're brainstorming in your planning stages and thinking about what to enter and which category to enter, really ask yourself the so what factor, because this is what the judges will be looking for. Are you just telling us things that you should be doing as a business, or is it actually going above and beyond? Is it really standout service? Is that really something that's out of the ordinary? And a useful way of doing this is brainstorm a plan, what you plan on putting in, and then getting other people around the business to verify whether they think that's successful. Most organisations have people that have worked in different operations around the country, so they'll have a good feel of whether things are stand out or not. Focus on clear success stories, and don't, for goodness sake, don't spend too much time padding out your entry with corporate information and too much about the business. Really try and stick to the point. If you don't end up using the full word limit, it really doesn't matter. Don't look back and think, oh, I've only used half, I'm not going to get through. If it's succinct, it's punchy, and it's to the point, the judges will be really appreciative. So really trying to focus on telling that story and making sure that you've stuck to the criteria and making it as easy as possible for the judges to score you would be really, really helpful. Another important thing as well is don't include everything that you've done well over the past year. So it comes back to being succinct. Make sure that you're focusing on the pertinent aspects that mean that you're standing out in that particular criteria. I'm sure you've done wonderful things as a business across the piece, but really make sure the focus remains.
Yeah, that's a really important point, I think. Sorry, I'm just a butt in. I just think that, as I spoke about earlier, I think what you're trying to do in your nomination form is to sort of tell your story. So make sure that it's kind of got a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that you're not sort of getting sidetracked down lots of other different avenues of other things that you've done really well. Just try and focus on that one story that really illustrates the achievement that you're trying to get across to the judges. And again, that being succinct is really important, because as having been on several judging panels, I know that when you're trying to read loads and loads and loads of different entries, the ones that stand out are really those ones that have stuck to the criteria and have told you that story really clearly all the way through and not got sidetracked. So yeah, so it's very important.
And just leading on to that, and again, I won't labour this too much, but have you told the story and presented real-life examples? So coming back to the heart point, it can be a really good idea to get people outside of the organisation involved in reading your entry. So once you've put the draft of it together, maybe bring in someone from that's not within the organisation, maybe a family member if you're allowed to share, maybe a friend that's outside the business, because you've got to think as well that the judges aren't necessarily operating in your particular field. So if someone that's not in your specialist area can read it and actually see that it's something wow and you've done something really interesting, then that's a good marker to know that that you've got all the information down in a clear and story-based way. I put this in 3 times because you wouldn't believe the amount of people that miss out the results. So what we mean by results is the evidence that shows the impact that's had on the customer, the impact that's had on the business. What does that mean? So really make sure that you've left a good chunk of space to focus on the results and give context of why you should win. Be really wary of using metrics and validation points that are just your own company specific. So always thinking about, so what does that mean? I mean, it's always a great idea if you can to use general industry measures like Net Promoter Score, customer effort. But if you don't use those, then make sure you're always telling a story in terms of the journey from where we've gone to where we were to where we've gone. There's no good saying our customer service or customer satisfaction now sits at 92% if you've not told us where you were before. If it says 92%, that could be great, but it could have been 95% the year before, and actually you've had a reduction. So we need to have some context of the journey and also some really good examples of why your results mean that you should win the award. Be succinct, beware the waffle factor, and don't overload the judges. So coming back to Claudia's point, really trying to get that as tight as possible. Proofread and just reevaluate. I know it's teaching grammar to suck eggs, but really you wouldn't believe how many times we see poor spelling in grammar, and it's really not up to the judges to try and piece together what the entry is trying to say. It should be nice and clear and nicely presented. And also beware of corporate acronyms again. So try to remember that the judges may not be working in your specialist field. So if there's industry metrics or industry standards or words that they may not be accustomed to, try and take those out, or at least put some meaning behind them so that the judges can successfully navigate the submission form. So that hopefully has given you some food for thought in respect to the entry process. I'm going to hand over to Claudia now, who's going to talk to you a little bit about how to prepare to meet the judges if you are in fact successful through the judging process.
Yeah, fantastic. And that is the first thing to say, actually, is that if you get through to the judging day, that is a huge, huge achievement in itself. So I can't emphasise this enough, that it is something to celebrate, because it means that the judges of the shortlisting process have been interested enough in your submission to want to see more and to actually meet the people that are behind that submission. So it really is a big, huge achievement just to get through to that final day. So if you can celebrate it in some way within your centre, I think that's really, really important to try and do that. So if you're preparing to meet the judges, there's a few things that you can do in advance. So research your competitors. This is really good if you do have time to do this, just to find out who you're up against. I mean, the shortlist should be public, in the public domain, so just find out a bit about each of the companies that you're up against. And just think about how you might be able to use that knowledge to your advantage. And I don't mean slagging off the other companies, but I mean things like if all of the other companies on the shortlist, for example, are big, huge companies, and you're quite a small company, perhaps you can talk to the judges about why you think that your small size of company actually benefits the customer, or how it helps you deliver better customer service, or vice versa. So just have a think about that, but think about who you're up against. Now, if possible, you should be able to find out how the judges will be scoring you, and this is generally closely matched to the original criteria, but there could be different weightings on individual criteria, so it's worth finding out what those weightings might be so that you can focus your presentation around that. Now, just going on to the presentation itself, it should tell the same story as your written submission, but do try to add new information just to keep it up fresh and interesting, and make sure you do give lots of real-life examples to really bring your written submission to life. And also, again, I know we keep saying this, but make sure you've answered each of the criteria in your presentation. So it can help to use headings on your presentation, for example, that are the same as the criteria, so that you're really clearly signposting to the judges each criteria as you're addressing it in your presentation. I mean, it might sound like you're sort of labouring it, but it really is important that the judges can see that you're addressing each of those criteria points. So from a practical perspective, just think about who should present. Any more than 3 people can make a presentation feel quite bitty and disjointed, so really try and keep it to 3 or fewer if possible. Think about who's going to say what. Do use some sort of presentation software, such as PowerPoint, like we're using today, but don't overload each slide with information. Really, your visual presentation is just a visual marker so that the judges can see where you are in your story and which main points you're trying to get across at that particular time. If there's lots of facts and figures that you want the judges to know about, perhaps offer them a handout afterwards, but do try to limit this to 1 or 2 sheets of A4. I can tell you now that any more than that, it will not be read. Lots of booklets filled with lots of different information and company results and all that kind of thing. The judges just simply don't have time to pore over that sort of information while they're making their deliberations at the end. So, but on the other hand, a handout of really clear 1 A4 sheet of all the main points that you've tried to cover with lots of examples can only help to refresh the judges' memories when they're making their deliberations at the end of the day. Okay, so then when you're actually presenting to the judges, I'll talk about dress rehearsals a little bit in this next slide. So when you're actually presenting, do be sure to use factual information and tell judges the whole story. Try and include the warts and all. It really makes it much more believable to hear that things were bad before they got better. And it just puts your achievements in an even better light and makes them all the more impressive to hear about the obstacles that you've had to overcome to achieve that success. And remember, again, keeping your story people-focused will just help make it more emotional and therefore more memorable for the judges if they feel like they can identify with the people in your story. So do use real-life examples and anecdotes. Now, I have been to some judging days where finalists have brought a customer along to the presentation so that the judges can hear firsthand how they've been affected by the achievements of the team or the individual. And this can be a really powerful strategy because it gives the judges the chance to actually quiz an actual end user, which is fantastic. But do remember that they're just there to add colour to your presentation and they're not delivering a polished performance themselves, because that can look a bit not quite right. Okay, so there are lots of ways to make yourself stand out from the rest. We once had an entrant who sang a song, for example, that they'd composed in their presentation. But really, the easiest way to be memorable is to speak from the heart with passion and enthusiasm. I know we keep saying this, but it really does make all the difference, because the judges themselves are customer service professionals. So they care about customers just like you do, and they'll relate to others who can demonstrate that same passion. And again, just talking about the judges, it can seem really daunting to present to a panel of judges, but just remember that they're not there to trip you up. There's no Simon Cowells to contend with. On the day, it'll be made clear to the judges that they are to keep any questions or comments to themselves until you've finished your presentation, and then they'll have the chance to ask any questions. And they know that you'll be nervous, and they're not expecting a perfect performance. So do bear that in mind. They are human beings as well. But then, having said that, they will be expecting you to be able to clearly and concisely communicate your message in a way that's easy to follow, as we've talked about earlier. So it is vital that you practice your presentation beforehand to ensure that it's no longer than the time allotted. It's so important to leave enough time for questions at the end. I can't emphasize this enough, because it allows the judges to clarify any points they're unsure of, or to ask for any additional information about something. It really gives you the chance to be clear about everything you've said, and be sure that the judges have heard everything that they needed to. I have been in judging sessions before where judges have actually said, "Oh, it's such a pity we didn't get to question them about this particular aspect of the presentation." And in all honesty, in some cases, I think it has put people out of the running for the award, because judges simply needed a little bit more information about one aspect of the presentation that they didn't get the chance to ask. So that's really, really important that you leave time for questions at the end. So we talked about, on the previous slide, was about the dress rehearsal, and that's really important. I think practicing a lot will just make you feel more confident. And if you can have a dress rehearsal prior to the judging day where you present to a panel of colleagues, the chances are that if they are clear on what you're trying to say in your presentation, then that it will be clear to the judges as well. And similarly to getting someone outside the business to read your submission, your initial submission, if you can get someone from outside the business to sit in on that dress rehearsal as well, just so that you get that completely unbiased view, I think that would stand you in good stead as well. And the last thing to say, it sounds quite masochistic to say this, but do try and enjoy it. It is a difficult thing to present to a panel of strangers, but I think it's really important just to remember that this is not a life or death situation. There's no need to let the nerves get the better of you. You're just telling your story to a group of like-minded individuals. And I think if you can think of it like that, then everything else will fall into place on the day. Okay, so I think that's it on presenting.
So thank you, Claudia. Really, then it's over to you guys in respect to questions. I have a couple here to kick us off. Debbie has asked one to you, Claude. When you're thinking about the 3 people or the people to take with you to the judging, can you give us some idea of who that might be in the business?
Okay, well, I think it's really powerful if you can get someone quite senior from within your business to come along, because that really shows that that customer service is really important to the business as a whole, and that the very senior level, sort of board level people have visibility of what the customer service department is doing and what the call centre is adding to the business. So that's great if you can get someone senior, or failing that, the contact centre manager, or anyone of a sort of executive level. And then I think anyone who's been sort of actively involved in the initiative that you're talking about, or the team success. Obviously, you need sort of key members of that team to come along and talk about what they've achieved.
If I can chip in there as well, I would also say, Debbie, that try and think about it. If you're successful to get through to the judging process, try and think of it from 2 points of view. One, obviously, you want to give it your absolute level best to win. So you want to make sure that your presentation is very polished and very to the heart, and obviously Claude's given us lots of great tips there. But also think about it from the exercise that it is. It's an opportunity to get all of your ducks in order, actually think about what you've done as a team, and maybe use it as an opportunity to bring in some of your more junior members. Is there a star agent that you could bring in, that their passion and enthusiasm is really infectious? Things like that make it really, really real, and the judges will appreciate that. So I think if you can find a blend of getting some seniority in there, and that might be yourself or someone more senior to you, but I'm a big fan of having either a customer or someone who's actually been doing it day in, day out, that's just slice them in half and customer service just bleeds out of every pore, because I think the judges will really like that, and it will be really the enthusiasm will be very infectious. And for that individual to be chosen to be part of that judging process can be a hugely motivating factor. And that sort of thing can feed across the business, as if to say that we're investing in the people to take us on that journey.
Absolutely. Yeah, a good mix, basically, is what we're saying.
A good mix. I've got another question here from Peter, which is a great question. What are the pet peeves the judges have when they're reading through entries? I've got a couple. Claude, do you have any pet peeves? Or shall I go first?
Where shall I start? Well, I think, gosh. Well, you start, and I'll have a think about my top ones.
My number one, and this is a number one every time I'm involved in judging and shortlisting and looking at judge entry processes, is seeing corporate waffle. And I'll give you an example, actually. An example would be something like, I don't know, we put the customer at the heart of everything we do, or we're committed to providing world-class customer service. It's just nonsense. We're all supposed to do that. We all want to do that. And it's really, to a judge, that means absolutely nothing. You might as well just put in there, we are committed to giving average service, and sometimes when we can be bothered, we give good customer service. It just doesn't have any meaning to it. That's what we should be there for. We should be striving to give the best possible service. So adding little lines like that is a big turn-off for me.
Absolutely, yeah, that is a top one. I think in terms of the way that entries are presented as well, I think it sounds really basic, but I think giving, having a little bit of white space in there so that it's just easy for the judges to actually read the entry. I've seen so many where they've tried to pack in as much as possible, so they've got, tiny fonts with no spaces between the lines, and it makes it so difficult and dense to try and get sort of anything out of it. I think, as you said before, Simon, using bullet points to emphasise, really clearly achievements is a fantastic way of getting that sort of information across, rather than just lots and lots of dense text. That's quite heavy going for judges that have to, go through hundreds and hundreds of entries. If they were all like that, it would just be an impossible task. So you can make yourself stand out by just presenting your entry well. And of course, spelling and grammar, just make sure it's right. It's just so, I don't know, when you're reading entry after entry after entry, and lots of them are sort of littered with mistakes. It's just, it just makes it hard to read and difficult to understand, and it's just a big turn off. So if you can get someone to read it through and double check everything for you, then all the better.
Yeah, completely agree with that, with bells on. So absolutely. Claude, have you had any other questions come through to you? I think we've got time for one more.
Yeah, I've had a couple of people have asked actually if what happens because we've talked obviously a lot about the impact on the customer, but what happens if your particular department, your customers, as it were, are internal customers within the company? So if you're sort of more of a support function, I think, I'll address this. I just think that it's the same. You're just talking about your customers. Just because they're internal, that doesn't make any difference, really. I just think you need to be able to demonstrate what you've done to make things easier for your customers. And just because your customers happen to be people within the same business, doesn't really make any odds. You should be able to demonstrate how we did this, and this is the impact that it had on our customers, who are the rest of the business. But again, it just needs to be quantifiable and tangible, the differences that you've made.
Yeah, completely agree. And I believe on the London South East Contact Centre Forum Awards, the entries, there's plenty of space in there to make it quite clear who the customers are, whether they're internal or external. So as long as you're making that clear, then yeah, treat it exactly the same, and hopefully follow some of the ideas that we've put forward today. Okay, well, I think we're going to have to close off the webinar there. I'm conscious of time. I just wanted to say, from my point of view, it's been a delight to be part of this first webinar, and really appreciative of Trevor inviting us along to hopefully share some interesting ideas and points. We've only been able to deal with a few of the questions, but if there's anything else that you think about, please do drop Trevor or any of the guys a line, and they will be able to ping them across to either Claudia and I, and we'll do our very best to answer any follow-up questions. And just finally, a big thank you to everyone that has taken the time this lunchtime to take part in the webinar, ask questions and listen. I hope you found it very useful. And all that remains to say from Claudia and I is good luck with the entry process. Good luck with the if you're successful in the shortlisting, and good luck with the judging. And we hope to see you on the big night.
Definitely. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Claudia. Bye-bye. Thank you, Simon. Thank you. Bye-bye.